and welcome to Erupt, the home for how businesses can scale and transform. Throughout this podcast, we aim to inspire and educate to help you and your business thrive. Across the course of our episodes, we'll be interviewing industry leaders to uncover some of the challenges across the world of work. We aim to give an insight into some of the fastest growing organisations across HR and technology. Please follow us on our journey to erupt and elevate your business. In today's episode, we discuss the topic of introducing a universal workforce model and whether this is a necessity or just a pipe dream. This panel included Dave Ulrich, co-founder and principal at the RBL Group, Bruce Morton, who is head of strategy at Allegis, John Boudreau, who is a professor at the University of Southern California, and Simon Bradberry, who is vice president at Allegis.
Hi, everybody. Coming out of the pandemic, as we all know, it's no news, companies are facing more pressure than ever to adjust to this rapidly changing workforce. You've got remote work, in-demand skills, rebuilding teams, evolving the organization to serve these totally new demands from clients. And so that truly means that every aspect of the business now and how you get work done is subject right now to a complete rethink and redesign. And I could not be happy because I'm a change agent. I love change. I love talking about this stuff. So I get excited when people have to make decisions quickly. So from that perspective, it's all good news. But so all of that would be hard enough. But as all of us on the panel agreed, actually, when we had a chat last week, is it's really nobody really knows what the future is going to look like. We'll all write articles about it and blogs, and we have an intelligent guess. Yeah, asking the big question of what is the most efficient and effective way of getting work done, which to me is the big question. That's actually now joined by how do we plan and prepare for something that we can't fully describe? So that's the challenge for the next 35 minutes. That's what we've been working on for the last couple of years, this concept of the universal workforce. So let me hand over to my colleague Simon to introduce that concept.
Well, guys, I will leave you to it. Have a great chat. And Simon, it's great to see you. Thank you for enabling this. Have a great discussion, guys.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, great. I think the first thing I've learned today is don't go last on this panel. When you're going to be introduced, you've got to follow Dave Ulrich and John Boudreau on the introductions. But no, thank you very much. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for the introductions, everybody. So I want to talk to us a little bit about the introduction to the concept of the universal workforce model. And the starting point is organizations have to operate in the real world. They need to succeed. It's competitive. And the number one item on CEOs' agendas worldwide is people. But they need, in our opinion, greater fluidity, greater flexibility to get work done in the optimal way. And I think there's a real question mark about, well, how do you actually do that though? You can hear the theory. How do we operationalize this? How do we make this something that really happens on a day-to-day basis? So what we're going to talk about is a new model. We're going to define it, and we're going to try and kind of move from a kind of channel-based structure to much more of a business focus. So this representation is essentially saying, this is what it looks like today. Typically, it's simplified, but you've got three categories. You've got permanent recruitment, you've got staff augmentation, including contingent workers and temporary workers, and you've got kind of procurement specialists hiring consultants, statement of work through third parties. But they're pretty siloed approaches, and that decision about which approach you go down happens very early in the process. It's normally made by the business themselves. And you might be talking to a recruiter for permanent recruitment, for staffing specialists, for staff augmentation, for procurement specialists, for consultants and statement of work. And each of those siloed approaches, each of those channels has its own systems, its own processes, its own data sourcing and policies. And there's sometimes some crossover, but it's pretty hard to do that. And what we're saying is that doesn't really give the fluidity and flexibility that organizations need. So let's start again and assume what we'd ideally want it to look like. There's a workforce business partner at the top, and a workforce business partner, imagine that this is someone who's a workforce expert, but also an expert in a particular business area, perhaps a similar structure to an HR business partner, but they're not HR business partners. These are people that are experts in the workforce for a particular business area. and supported using data with an intelligent workforce platform. The concept of an intelligent workforce platform being an AI-driven tool that captures the entire workforce, internal, external, past, present, and future. So that's the headline concept. If I'm going to define that, I want to keep this as simple as possible. There are three defining elements to the universal workforce model. Firstly, task-based versus role-based. What does that mean? Well, as a starting point, think about gigs rather than job specs, but task-based versus role-based. Secondly, you have the workforce business partners. Thirdly, you have an intelligent workforce platform. If you have those three things, you have a universal workforce model. If you have two out of them, you don't. So that's essentially me setting up the definition of a universal workforce model. What I'll do is I'll hand back to Bruce and we can start the conversation.
Great, thanks, Simon. So Dave, let me come to you first. Is this approach that Simon just laid out there, specifically the harmonization of those channels, is that realistic inside organizations?
Thanks for letting me join the session. I'm going to take a step back to answer that question. I'm going to suggest three things. Number one, HR is not about HR. HR is about helping a company succeed in its marketplace. Unless and until a company succeeds in the marketplace, there is no workplace. And I think that outside in logic becomes a meta framework in which everything occurs. Number two, what is it that HR contributes to that success in the marketplace? We believe there's three things. We're calling it now human capability, because talent is the key ingredient. And that's what you just heard, is how do we make sure we have the right people? Second, though, is the organization. How do we make sure people come together in a high-performing team or unit or culture? And third is leadership. So I think what's fascinating, number one, is that we as HR professionals at this ERUPT conference try to help an organization succeed in the marketplace through talent, leadership, and organization. And number three, how do we then organize work to make that happen? There's a lot of attention right now about where people work and how they work. Do I work hybrid? Do I not work hybrid? How do I work with technology, in person, not in person? I believe that's the wrong question. I think the first question, given my first two concepts, is why are we working? The boundary of work is not a place. It's not in an office. Look at where we are today. John is in the United States in his New Mexico. I'm in the United States in my office. Simon, I'm not sure where you are. Bruce, I'm not sure where you are. It doesn't matter where you work. And it doesn't matter if it's technology or in person. What matters is why you work. To point one, are we creating value for a customer today or tomorrow? And point two, by getting better people, organization, and leadership together to make that happen. With that in mind, I think the universal workforce model, I would add workplace, because we don't want to just have good people who don't work well together. If we have a great workforce and workplace model, the why, the where, and the how you work doesn't matter. Okay, very long answer. 3 points. HR is not about HR, but creating value in the marketplace. 2, through talent, organization, and leadership. And 3, by focusing on why we work and what we work on, more and where and how.
Great, thanks, Dave. And John, let me come to you. Do you see that this is, can organizations get there, have this far more harmonized approach as they think holistically?
Thanks a lot, and I'll just echo Dave's thanks to everyone for the chance to participate in the ERUPT conference and join all of you. I think harmonization of the channels is one element. I think Dave has correctly taken it to the larger picture of what is the contribution here. So I think, yes, we see there's lots of channels involved. I think that's likely to be one of the challenges that people face. This is not a HR issue. It's the issues you're addressing exist in procurement, they exist in operations. These talent sources span many, many different functions. So I would say one of the challenges of the HR discipline is that they're going to need to open up their boundary, something that's been recognized for a long time. Mara Swan and I, in a Harvard Business Review article, I got probably 5 or 7 years ago, said the metaphor might be put your operations lead, your procurement lead, and your HR lead in a room and get them all talking about talent sourcing and how they do it. Put your line leaders in a room and find those line leaders that are pulling out their credit card and going to the freelance platform to meet the demands. And that was all happening pre-pandemic. It's been totally accelerated by the pandemic. So I think Dave has laid out a beautiful framework. I would say overlaying that framework is the need to operate in uncertainty. I think I don't know is the correct answer to most of the questions that are being asked in this model. That doesn't mean paralysis. Finance operates in an I don't know world. Marketing operates in an I don't know world. Plenty of models for that. And one of them is what I would call the great work experiment. So all the things that Dave talked about are also moving fluidly. And that means that the mindset not only needs to be harmonization, not only needs to be a holistic picture, but also the willingness to experiment, to fail, take all those tools about agile development and apply them to work as the new focus of agile development.
Great, thanks, John. Simon, do you want to make any comment on that?
Yeah, I think I try and come at it from a practical perspective, and to say, I think the big question is, where do you start? I think most organizations that I'd speak to would understand the theory and understand the objectives and understand the role of HR within the role of the organization. But to actually start the stepping stone, step 1 and step 2, they might be the hardest things, because when you're operating in a world which is siloed, breaking those down and seeing practically what do I need to do to make this change, let's not underestimate that, because that's what practitioners are facing on a day-to-day basis. So I think one of the roles of myself and Bruce and others will be to make that as easy as possible. And that will start with saying, well, this is not going to be achieved overnight. This is going to be a North Star if it's a direction you want to get to. And it's about how do we get there one step at a time.
Yeah, I think the point you made earlier, Dave, about getting people in the same room, you made as well, John. It reminds me, pre-COVID, I was working with a client on the West Coast, fintech company, and I pulled in the CIO, CHRO, CMO, business leaders. And I'm 5 minutes into the meeting, and somebody said, "Can I just stop? I just want to say, this is the first time we've ever been in a room together." I'm like, wow, okay, my work is done. But I think it is about bringing everybody to the table. But John, I'm really interested on because you've written so much about this, and I've been following you for years, but based on the work that you've done with many companies on this subject of task versus, that whole concept of, do we look at the task, we look at the role, moving to a task-based approach, what does it actually mean, and what are the implications that you've seen?
So yeah, let me talk a little. It turns out, looking back, that my work was about this task-based and atomization of work for longer than I thought. Many people are familiar with the example from Beyond HR, which is now about 15 years old, where Pete and I looked at a Disney theme park, and we talked about the idea that the sweepers in the park have at least 2 different tasks they're doing. One is cleaning, and one is interacting and entertaining guests. Now, we didn't talk about task-based work at that point, but what we pointed out was that the only way to see the pivotal contributions of work to the organization, to the mission of the business, is to take apart the work, and that some things level out, like cleaning, and some things are very pivotal, like interacting with guests. Then my colleagues and I wrote about Lead the Work, about work and sourcing work from non-employment sources. And in that, we realized that we needed to deconstruct the work, because the assignment of the work doesn't take place at the job level. A contractor doesn't come in and do a job. What happens is it occurs at the task level, and you have a mix of contractors, freelancers, volunteers, and regular full-time employees doing the task that used to be a job. Finally, in Reinventing Jobs, Robin J. Suthasan and I wrote about automation. We realized you can't solve the automation issues unless you see them at the task level. Automation does not replace jobs. Automation replaces, augments, or reinvents tasks, and that creates new work. That kind of led to the new book coming out with MIT Press in March of next year that is specifically about deconstruction. So the metaphor, I just invite people, so this task-based idea is fundamental to a great deal of the edges of work. Lots of things that are being talked about here at the Erupt conference. Jobs and job-based systems are going to work fine for lots of work for quite a while. However, it's at those edges that we see the need for something different. And my view is that part of what's different is we need to change the work operating system to this task-based level. I would say to those watching, find the metaphor that works in your organization for anything that can be seen more clearly when you take it apart. I worked with a pet food company. We used the metaphor that you can build pet food from bone and meat, or I can tell you there's vitamins and minerals. And if I let you build it on vitamins and minerals, you see solutions you could never approach if you did it with bones and meat. So bones and meat is jobs. Vitamins and minerals is something like tasks, deconstructing the work, but also deconstructing the workers into their capabilities, as Dave mentioned, and deconstructing what we might call degrees or college degrees into qualifications.
Great, thanks, John. That was awesome. So, Dave, I'd love to hear your view.
Let me just comment and say, I hope everybody just listened to what John said, because he's given you the history of the idea. Let me just make a couple of quick comments. One, I really love the idea that we don't know, that uncertainty is a reality. And so I've struggled with that. What do you do with uncertainty? And the metaphor is, under pressure, some rocks crumble and become dust and others become diamonds. That's not my line, but somebody should tell me who said that so I can give him. Probably Lee Dyer probably said it. Lee is a wise man. He's a mentor of both John and me. But I think the metaphor for uncertainty is to harness it. Don't manage it. Don't be threatened by it. Don't ignore it. Harness it and find opportunity. Number two, to Simon's comment, where do you start? I'd start with the customer. What is it we do in work that a customer will find valuable? Because if we do a task that a customer doesn't find valuable, we may do it very efficiently, but unless a customer is willing to pay a premium or pay something to do it. Number three, I love John's work on separating the job versus the task. I've written a piece building on John's work, or probably plagiarizing it without credit, but trying to give credit. I don't think we do workforce planning anymore. I think we do work task planning, because the workforce is not the issue. The work task is the issue. And when you go to task, that can be done by a number of people, full-time employees, part-time employees, contractors, and technology. And we've all experienced that. I don't know where people live, but in stores where I live, they now do their own checkout. I mean, there's hundreds of cases of this, that the technology is replacing the task. The final point, the fourth point I want to make very quickly, I think this applies to HR. Many on the call are in HR. We've done competencies of HR people for a number of years. There's two major studies. John and Ed Lawler have done one, and we've done one that I hope complement each other. We've always defined your job in HR as a role with a noun: business partner, change agent, credible activist. In this round, we defined your role as a verb. We don't care where you work. Remember, it's not where or how, it's what? Accelerates business, advances human capability, mobilizes information, fosters collaboration, simplifies complexity. I think those verbs focus on the task regardless of where that task may be done. So those are my four comments. Harness uncertainty, start with customers, outside in, work task more than workforce, and finally, verbs more than nouns as a simple metaphor.
Love that. Those nouns. Thank you. Simon, thoughts?
Yeah. So my thought would be, I mentioned very briefly at the beginning about gigs. And the reason I mention that is that this is something that I see coming up. I'm hoping to use it as a bridge for people that are working with us on a day-to-day basis to try and again make it feel really real. There's an awful lot of talk about gigs and about not just the gig economy, but gigs internally within organizations. Can I've got something that needs to get done. Can we get someone to do it 1 or 1.5 days a week internally? Is that talent available? Can someone come and be seconded to me? And the gig approach seems to make a lot of sense to people, and it seems to be something that is within reach. But gigs are tasks. I mean, interestingly, when we were working on developing and defining the universal workforce model, we did it using gigs. Bruce and I talked about tasks, what needed to be achieved, and we broke those tasks down and basically ended up assigning those to individuals in the organization. And so I just think that, again, in terms of my practitioner mentality, in terms of where do I start, I think for task space, I'd encourage people to think, well, if you're already looking at gigs rather than a job spec, you've already started down that path and you're acknowledging that this is a way to go, and therefore it's perhaps not that far out of reach, because you might be thinking, yeah, but I don't work with tasks, I work with gigs. That's the framework I work with job specs. That's my framework. But it is actually perhaps a little bit easier to take the first step than might at first appear to be the case.
I really like the workforce business partner metaphor, I'll call it, because clearly we're going to see it evolve over time. I like that it is a prompt for organizations to consider the leadership and functional implications of harmonizing all these sources of workers. So I love that. I can see this role coming. I think a lot of people might look at that diagram and think that's the new term for HR business partner. And I think we need to take this opportunity to think very creatively. I think a lot of people will say, my staffing lead, my learning lead, my HR business partner, that's who's going to do that. I can see this role coming from a combination of HR, procurement, legal, operations, et cetera. In the CREATE project, CHREATE, a few years ago, we had a bunch of very strong HR leaders form teams. And one of the things that the teams came out with was this idea of a boundaryless approach to HR. So I love the metaphor. In terms of accountability, I think that there is a danger that looking at the diagram will cause people to think that this shifts accountability to a new functional office, however we define it. Again, Pete Ramstad and I have been writing probably for 15 or 20 years. The ultimate accountability should rest with line leaders. And so I would want to encourage people to avoid the danger of saying, well, we're done. We've got this workforce partner. They're the Sherpa. When line leaders don't meet their talent goals, they can say, well, you have to go look at what did that workforce partner do for me. I think we need to shift that and say line leaders are accountable with the support of a functional leader like this workforce partner that you've outlined, in the same way that that leaders are accountable for the money decisions they make with the support of a finance leader like a controller or someone like that.
Yeah, great points. Thank you. Dave?
I would just so agree. One of my favorite, when I taught MBA students number of years ago, I had a favorite final exam question, and it was, who has primary accountability and responsibility for the HR? Today, I'd call it human capability, because it's not just talent, it's also organization and people. Who has primary accountability? 1, the line manager. 2, the head of HR. 3, it's shared. 4, the consultant. 5, I don't care, I'm going into finance. That was my favorite question. By the way, those who answered 5 are now running companies, and everybody answered 3.
Good.
And I marked it wrong. Who has primary accountability? I think it's the line manager. I share that with John. In building a home, we built a home. We're the owner. We have primary decision about what happens. HR folks are architects. They're designers. They're facilitators. They're enablers. Now they share ownership. If somebody's doing something stupid, they let them know. If they're doing something illegal, they don't let them do it. The one place I push a little bit is, I think, and I've played around for a few years with the HR business partner model, like John has played around with the task work. I don't think it's just about workforce anymore. I think HR business folks who sit in meetings with other business leaders, and I'm going to go back to my stupid hand gestures because they're more memorable than my words. Do you have the right people? And that's what this universal workforce model provides. Do we have the right people, right skills, right commitment? Do you also have the right organization, the team, the culture, the talent, the agility, and do you have the right leadership? For me, those 3 things become absolutely critical. And so it's not a workforce partner. I've called it human capability. Human is the people, capability is the organization, talent, and then to be really stupid and memorable, to embarrass myself totally. My forearms represent the HR systems, what Allegis and others providers provide. And so somebody said, Dave, you've got talent, organization, leadership, and HR, and then you can do the HR cheer. Okay, that's stupid. I've embarrassed myself. But that's what we again, I love simplification. That's what we walk into a meeting and say, to help that customer get what they want and to succeed in the marketplace, do we have the right talent, organization, leadership, and the HR systems? That's where I would hope we continue to go.
Thank you, Dave. Simon?
I can't imagine, Dave, as we get into the increasing complexity and of work and the increasing centrality of work, I cannot wait to see how you incorporate your feet into this.
Well, I've had a bad hair day and I could incorporate that. But John, I'd love to know, and I'm really sorry to intrude, John. John, Bruce, I'm sorry to intrude. What do you see about leadership role? John, I've been playing with that and I don't have it yet. So,
Yeah.
we often have metaphors of leadership. What does leadership look like in that distributed, task-oriented system?
It's really nice.
I'm really sorry, Bruce, to intrude, but
by the way,
I now have a page of notes that I'm stealing.
As do I.
And I'd love to know.
I've got my disco dance.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Okay. Yeah. Well, I've embarrassed myself
Simon,
totally.
If I may, I'll just respond. Thank you, Dave, for that. That's really, and I think you've pointed out, let me very much reinforce that, and I think I'll be a little edgy. There is a tendency to think workforce is the work of HR and that we're finished when we do the workforce. And I think Dave has long been a good proponent of organization and leadership. We see that at the center that I'm at USC is about a Center for Effective Organizations. A lot of work there on org design, iconic people like Ed Lawler, Sue Morman, Chris Worley. So we kind of wrestle with that. Dave, I think one thing that I would say that's on my mind and that I've written about is this idea of fluidity. So number one, we're talking about deconstruction. So how do you lead tasks, gigs, et cetera? But I think more fundamentally, and let me give due credit to my colleague Jonathan Donner, who he and I wrote a piece for MIT Sloan Management Review recently, and was all prompted by his experience at Unilever with decades of experience on leadership and on organization. And what we suggested there is that this fluidity is the key thing. So you're going to be leading in short-term bursts. You're going to be leading teams that form and then regroup. And I think, one of the fundamental motivations of the new book, Dave, was we had leaders saying, I realized that what got in the way of agility was jobs. I realize now that I was trying, a lot of retired HR leaders who read the manuscript said, oh, I was trying to do agility with jobs. And I needed to give my leaders a mindset of, we could call it gigs or tasks, these fluid, call them teams, call them project groups that are going to form and unform based on this platform that is handing people opportunities. Well, first question of a leader is, wait a minute, I have 3 people, they report to me, they're in boxes that have lines that go to a box that's me, they have a job, and they're available when I go to them because it's their job to be available to me. Now you're telling me they're available to everyone. And parts of their work time is going to be moved out into these volunteer projects and all that sort of thing. So we wrote more about it in the MIT article, Dave, but I think that notion of leading in a fluid world where you get a short burst to lead, that says leaders need, it's more humanistic, not more mechanistic. Leaders need to have a brand. They need to have a North Star, and they're only going to get to
Somebody
express
should do a book on leadership brand.
Indeed. And you can see what I mean. That brand, you can no longer just say, well, all those people report to me. I'll get around to conveying my brand, to conveying our values, et cetera. We'll have time. Well, no, you might only have 5 minutes. You might only have 6 months. And so what is that comprehensive leadership community that is going to be sharing this new, now more fluid, as we might say, workforce, Dave? And what is the organization that's fluidly being constructed? So that's what I would just add the word fluid to everything you said.
I really like it, John. And I'm really sorry. This is rude, Bruce and Simon, but put 2 academics on a call.
We just, Dave and I don't see each other enough.
No, we don't. And I wish I could, John. John, the thing I've been struggling with, and I love fluidity as an extension, the next step of agility. I've been struggling with the concept of paradox. Yes, you should be fluid, and yes, you should be structured. Yes, you should care with emotion and empathy, and yes, you should hold people accountable. And so when do I become more fluid? And when do there is a box. So I've got boxes, but I've got dots. So anyway, I don't have an answer to that. You said it earlier, John, in a world of uncertainty, I don't know. But I've been struggling with that. How do I help leaders live in a world of uncertainty, which is not to, John, you'll probably remember, and maybe Simon and Bruce are old enough, POCs, position organization. Let's get rid of that crap. Because that fluidity, then there still is a paradox, because I need consistency as well as agility and cares. And so Anyway, John, that was helpful. I've got another note. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Bruce, I will cede my
Thank you,
my
Dave.
intrusion.
Thanks, Dave.
Fascinating.
And I think it does tie into, being measured more on an outcome than an input. I think we're all on board with that. And that does help with some of that. At least I've got a way of measuring, is this working with all this agility going on? But Simon, your thoughts on any of that?
Well, just a couple of things with regards to the model and the conversation that's just taken place. We're not trying to be neutral. The model's not trying to be neutral on fluidity. It's absolutely trying to reinforce it. It's saying, get rid of these silos, and that will help you with a fluid model that will help you deliver tasks and help your business outcomes. So the plan is that that's a joined up approach. The other thing I'd like to say that the intention is that it's not neutral on, is that there is a shifting of accountability towards business leadership, because this potential pitfall of, well, we could point the finger at the workforce business partner is real. But it's happening today anyway. It happens today. My talent acquisition team can't find X, my partner can't find Y. And the idea is that by having somebody who's dedicated and accountable directly to the business reduces that. And there is a shift of accountability, whatever that looks like, towards the business leader and the business unit. That's the intention. It may not be perfect journey, but that's the intention. And the final point I wanted to make, I'm just going to reflect on something that John said when he first started speaking in response to this, was where do these people come from? Underneath that is the fact that these people may not exist that easily today. If we were to define the output that we're looking for and the skill set that's required along, running RFPs or understanding all the different elements of the workforce, understanding areas of business in depth, well, we've got some work to do there as an industry and across the globe to actually make sure we've got people delivering that. So recognize that, and another reason why things won't change overnight.
Great, thank you. So Dave, coming back to you, it's notoriously different. Difficult to realize the promise of technology. We've all worked with organizations that have got too many different systems that don't speak to each other and so on. But have you seen any companies being able to take more of a holistic approach, looking, across the globe of how they're getting work done and truly using the data to make those informed decisions?
I think we in our field are addicted to best practice, and we love to share them, and and Allegis has them, and we all have them. I'm going to not answer that, because I think best practice is a dangerous addiction. Because as soon as you name a company, somebody says, I know another piece of that elephant, I've touched the trunk, I've touched the leg. They're not a best company. What I would encourage companies to do is not just do benchmarking or best practice or predictive analytics, which tells you why they're the best. Do guidance. Look at John's work with Peter and others. What can I do in my company? When I was introduced, somebody said, you lost weight. We love to say, how did you lose weight? And the answer is, don't listen to me. Go figure out for yourself what you can do to lose weight. And I'd encourage companies to look at the work that you're doing with the universal workforce, Allegis, the work that John's done, which has a rich evolution in history and is continuing to do. But then take that work and don't adopt it, adapt it. What does that mean in my company? How do I take all of those ideas and make them work for me? And so I'd encourage us to go to create our own best practice and to get guidance for what we can do. Anyway, that's a bit contrarian. The other place I'd encourage people to look is, I've been reading work by Rob Cross on networks. His stuff is phenomenal. It's just really clever. And we're calling that today, we put new labels on stuff so that they sounds cool. We call it ecosystems. I think work is going to increasingly be an ecosystem. It doesn't matter, again, it doesn't matter where or how you work. It matters why you're working and what you're working on. And that work could be, it could be a technician in Sri Lanka. It could be a marketing expert in Johannesburg. With the world we live in today, you don't care where or how. What you care is why and what. And I hope we can begin to create those ecosystems that build great connection.
That's a great point, Dave. And we are certainly seeing real hard evidence of what we call talent anywhere. It's not just being talked about, it is actually being practiced, and companies are creating a competitive advantage around that. So it's a great point. John, your thoughts on that?
So a couple of them, David. This is just, as everyone can probably see, this is just so much fun. I love Dave's refocus from, I would say, where and where and when to why and what. I think on that one, I just want to piggyback on that and say that one of the opportunities we have at the moment, and it was really opened up by everyone changing their work when COVID hit, whether they were frontline or working at home, is this idea of engaging the worker. So the why, we often think about the why and the what being defined by the workplace, by the person who is taking the work, the person who is paying for the work, we might say. I think what we're seeing is a real rise, and these systems will absolutely accelerate it, that the worker themselves are going to be involved in this definition. And that all kinds of leaders are going to need to change their mindset a bit, that you don't get to define this. It always has been a mutual definition to the extent that workers could leave or something like that. There's a whole literature called work crafting in the scholarly world that people should take a look at. People have always crafted their work. That is now crafting work on steroids. So I would say your system, this universal workforce system, is going to also be used by workers to craft their work. And then with regard to analytics, Dave, I think you're right. A lot of what passes for evidence-based research is polling. A lot of what passes for evidence-based research is finding out who's doing what. That's all good. It's all important. It's interesting. I would go to an analytic principle that I think is true from first statistics classes, that any measure is only measurable, its value is only as good as improving pivotal decisions. In this case, about what Dave said, let's say talent, organization, leadership. And so as we're going to have so much data, we're going to have so many measures that I think we're going to need to again return to first principles and beginning asking ourselves, who is the audience for this? And exactly how is it that we expect these measurements to cause them to improve decisions that are pivotal in the areas that we've all talked about today? Much more than the sophistication of the analytics, whether people like the analytics, whether it's predictive, whether it's AI based or not, fundamentally, is it improving something that's pivotal?
By the way, that's what John taught me decades ago around the decision science in HR. And I hope people go back, John, your work from when we were both young. I thought your work
90s
was really powerful. And by the way, good ideas don't go away. And I think that science of decision making is really critical. And let me can I circle and underline and highlight? I saw a paper, and I don't know who wrote it, but they called it employee primacy, that the employee becomes a primary feature. And the research in my world, the employee experience is correlated with customer experience.
Right.
So it's not about the employee primacy, because we love employees, of course we do. But when the employees have a better experience, the customer does, and then the investor does. And that creates that virtuous cycle. So John, thank you. I've made a few notes to go look at some of your earlier work again and rediscover some of those insights. Really helpful. Thank you.
Well, great call out to Rob Cross and others, Dave, too. Wonderful. And your own work.
Thanks. So as we thought, we've run out of time very, very quickly. But Simon, I'll let you make one last comment on that if you want to, and then I'll wrap us up.
Yeah, thank you. My observation of talking to organizations from the technology standpoint is this is a really big issue for them today. It's not that they don't have an HRIS or something that houses their like permanent recruitment process like an ATS, but there's kind of a bewildering array of the latest sourcing tool or the latest onboarding tool or how to engage people in a different way, and they vary by geography and over time, and even if you go right, we want X, then to actually go down the path of getting the budget, getting agreement, getting it implemented, getting it to be prioritized against all the other myriad of projects which may be more seen as customer orientated. It's a real challenge for them. So I see the concept of the intelligent workforce platform as being an opportunity to basically give more, to have a single point and then give more that's integrated automatically with that intelligent workforce platform, along the lines of kind of simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Make it simpler, and then actually give you more sophisticated outcome.
Great, thanks for that. Well, today is the start of a series of events where I'm going to be talking about this topic, and we've obviously only barely scratched the surface today, but we've actually written a book, an ebook on this universal workforce model, which is going to be published early 2022. And in the meantime, we are going to be, everybody that's attended today, thank you. We will be sharing a preview of that. So keep an eye out for your email. So massive thanks to Dave, John, Simon. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate you jumping in on this.
This podcast was brought to you by Annapurna Erupt. If you enjoyed this episode, please visit our Go Erupt website to get involved in our regular podcasts, video footage, and live events throughout the year. Thank you for listening.